The man standing beside me at the altar was supposed to save my family. But 3 nights after our wedding, I heard his voice inside my dead sister's phone. There are some marriages that begin with love. Some begin with hope. Mine began with debt. My name is Lena Hart. I was 24 years old when I married a man I had known for exactly 11 days. Not because I loved him. Not because I wanted to. But because my family was drowning. And he was the only person offering US air. If you saw the wedding photos, you'd never know the truth. The expensive flowers. The oceanfront ceremony in California. The elegant white dress. The smiling guests. Everything looked perfect. But in every single picture, my eyes looked terrified. Because deep down, I knew something wasn't right about the man I married. I just didn't know how wrong I was. 3 months earlier, my life had been completely different. Simple. Messy. Normal. I lived with my mother in a small house outside Seattle. I worked long shifts at a bookstore cafe while trying to keep our collapsing family together after my older sister's death. Her name was Eva Hart. And even now, saying her name still hurts. Eva wasn't just my sister. She was the loud one. The brave one. The person who filled every room completely. When she laughed, people looked over automatically. When she cried, the whole house felt it. And then one rainy night, she died in a car accident coming home from work. Just like that. 27 years old. Gone before anyone could say goodbye. After her death, everything in our family slowly started falling apart. My mother stopped sleeping properly. Medical bills piled up from her stress-related hospital visits. The cafe where my father once worked shut down permanently. And the worst part? We discovered my father had secretly borrowed money from dangerous people before he died 2 years earlier. Money we knew nothing about. Debt collectors started showing up constantly. Threatening letters arrived weekly. Calls came at all hours. At first, we tried surviving quietly. Selling furniture. Skipping meals. Pretending things would improve. But debt doesn't disappear because good people are suffering. It grows. And eventually, it corners you. One evening, I came home to find my mother crying at the kitchen table. What happened? I asked immediately. She quickly wiped her eyes. Nothing. That word again. Nothing. The favorite lie of broken families. I sat beside her gently. Mom. Her hands trembled while holding an envelope. They're giving us 30 days, she whispered. My stomach dropped instantly. What? If we don't pay everything. Her voice cracked completely. They'll take the house. The room started spinning slightly. That house was all we had left of our family. My father painted the walls himself. Eva planted flowers outside every spring. Every memory of our childhood lived there. And now we were about to lose it. I barely slept that night. I spent hours searching for extra jobs, loan options, anything. But every answer ended the same way. We needed more money than I could ever earn in time. Then, 2 days later, someone walked into the bookstore cafe and changed my life forever. His name was Damian Cross. And the first thing I noticed about him was how calm he looked. Tall. Dark suit. Silver watch. Controlled expression. The kind of man who looked expensive without trying. He ordered black coffee and sat near the window quietly reading emails on his phone. At first, I barely paid attention. Men like him didn't belong in places like this. But when I brought his coffee, he looked at my name tag and said softly, Lena Hart. Something about the way he said my name made me pause. Yes. His expression changed slightly. Almost unreadable. Then he asked, You're Eva Hart's sister, right? The moment he said her name, my chest tightened instantly. I stared at him carefully. How do you know my sister? A brief silence. Then he replied calmly. We knew each other years ago. Something about his answer felt incomplete. But before I could ask more, my manager called me away. When I returned later, Damian was gone. But sitting on the table was a folded note. I opened it carefully, and my entire body went cold. I can help your family. Damian Cross. At the bottom was a phone number. That night, I kept staring at the note. It felt wrong. Dangerous. But desperation changes the way fear works. When people are drowning, even suspicious rescue feels tempting. 3 days later, I called him. He answered immediately, almost like he'd been waiting. I was wondering when you'd call. His voice was smooth, controlled, impossible to read emotionally. What do you want? I asked quietly. A pause. Then, to make you an offer. Every instinct inside me whispered to hang up. But I didn't. Because fear for your family is louder than instinct. We met the next evening at a quiet restaurant downtown. Everything about Damien felt composed. Precise. Like a man who never lost control of situations. He listened while I explained our financial situation. Not with pity. Just attention. And when I finished, he calmly placed a folder on the table. Inside were documents. Bank transfers. Debt settlements. Property protection papers. Enough money to save everything. The house. The loans. My mother's medical bills. All of it. I looked up at him slowly. My hands shaking. Why? Damien stared at me for several seconds before answering. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. Because I want you to marry me. I laughed immediately. Not because it was funny. Because it was insane. What? I'm serious. No. But he didn't react emotionally. Didn't argue. Didn't pressure. Instead, he calmly said, take 24 hours before refusing. I stared at him. You can't buy people. His eyes darkened slightly. No, he said quietly. But sometimes people make impossible choices to protect the ones they love. That sentence haunted me all night. Because he was right. I wanted to hate him. But every time I looked at my exhausted mother sleeping on the couch, every time I saw unpaid bills, every time I imagined losing our home, my anger weakened. And slowly, desperation won. 11 days later, I married Damien Cross. The wedding happened fast. Too fast. Almost like he wanted it completed before I could change my mind. And the strangest part? He never acted cruel. Never controlling. Never inappropriate. Just emotionally distant. Like a man carrying secrets heavier than love. The first night after our wedding, he barely touched me. Instead, he stood near the balcony of the beach house we temporarily stayed in. Silent. Lost in thought. I watched him carefully. You regret this already? I asked coldly. Damien looked at me over his shoulder. And for a brief second, I saw sadness in his eyes. Real sadness. Then it disappeared instantly. No, he replied quietly. I regret things that happened long before this. That answer unsettled me deeply. Because suddenly, it felt like I had walked into a story that started before I arrived. 3 nights later, while unpacking boxes from my old house, I found Eva's belongings. Clothes. Photos. Old notebooks. And finally, her phone. The screen was cracked from the accident. But somehow, it still turned on. My chest tightened instantly seeing her wallpaper. A selfie of us laughing together years ago. I sat quietly on the floor scrolling through old photos. Old messages. Old memories. Trying not to cry. Then suddenly, a notification appeared. An old saved voice recording. Date: 2 weeks before Eva died. Confused, I pressed play. Static filled the speaker briefly. Then, a man's voice. And the moment I heard it, every drop of blood left my body. Because it was Damien. Eva. If Lena ever finds out the truth, everything falls apart. My hands started shaking violently. Then Eva's voice whispered back. She can never know what really happened between us. The recording ended. And in that moment, I realized something horrifying. My husband wasn't a stranger after all. He had been connected to my dead sister the entire time. And somehow, I had just married the biggest secret of her life. The man I married knew my sister before she died. But the terrifying part wasn't that he lied to me. It was that my sister lied too. I replayed the recording at least 15 times. Maybe more. I honestly lost count. Every single time. The result was the same. Damien's voice. Clear. Calm. Real. If Lena ever finds out the truth, everything falls apart. The words echoed inside my head like a nightmare. I sat frozen on the floor of our bedroom while rain hit the windows outside. The cracked phone trembled slightly in my hands. This couldn't be happening. The man I married. The man sleeping beside me every night. The man who mysteriously appeared offering to save my family. He knew Eva. Not casually. Not distantly. Closely enough to hide secrets together. My chest tightened painfully. Because suddenly, none of this felt accidental anymore. The marriage. The timing. The money. His interest in me. What if I wasn't chosen randomly? What if Damien married me because of Eva? That thought made me feel physically sick. I quickly locked the phone as footsteps approached down the hallway. Damien. My heartbeat became dangerously loud. The bedroom door opened slowly. He stepped inside quietly, loosening his tie after work. You're awake, he said softly. Normal. Completely normal. I stared at him, trying to see the man from the recording hidden behind his calm expression. Damien noticed the tension immediately. His eyes moved briefly toward the phone in my hand, then back to my face. What happened? He asked quietly. I almost confronted him right there. Almost. But something stopped me. Instinct. Because if Damien hid this for so long, then there was a reason. And I wasn't ready to hear it yet. So instead, I forced myself to say, nothing. His gaze stayed on me several seconds longer than comfortable. Like he knew I was lying. Then finally, he nodded once. Try to sleep, he said softly. And somehow, that gentle tone scared me more than anger would have. That night, I barely closed my eyes. Every time I looked at Damien sleeping beside me, I heard the recording again. She can never know what really happened between us. What happened? My mind created terrifying possibilities. Were they together romantically? Did Eva love him? Did he love her? And worst of all, did my sister die because of something connected to him? By morning, I felt emotionally destroyed. But I pretended everything was normal. Damien left early for work after quietly asking if I needed anything. I answered politely, like a stranger. The second he left, I grabbed Eva's phone again. This time, I searched deeper. Messages, call logs, photos, anything connected to Damien. At first, I found nothing. Almost too little. Which somehow felt even more suspicious. Then I discovered a hidden folder inside Eva's Notes app. Password protected. My hands shook slightly. I tried birthdays first. Mine. Hers. Mom's. Nothing worked. Then suddenly, a thought hit me. Damien's birthday. I remembered it from our marriage documents. I entered the numbers carefully. And the folder opened instantly. My stomach dropped. Inside were dozens of voice memos, photos, saved locations, journal entries. And every single one involved Damien Cross. No. I opened the oldest note first. I met him again today. Damien pretends he's cold, but he isn't. I think he carries guilt everywhere like it's part of his body. Sometimes when he looks at me, it feels like he's apologizing for something I don't understand yet. My chest tightened. I scrolled further. He says Lena would hate him if she ever knew the truth. I asked what truth. He wouldn't answer. I stopped breathing for a second. Further down. Another entry. I think Damien is trying to protect Lena from something. But I still don't know what. Protect me? From what? None of this made sense. I opened a photo next. Eva stood beside Damien outside a restaurant. She was smiling brightly. Damien wasn't smiling, but he was looking at her carefully, softly. Not like business associates. Not like strangers. Like someone emotionally attached. Pain twisted sharply inside my chest. Not because I loved Damien. Not yet. But because suddenly, I felt like an outsider in my own family story. Eva knew him. Deeply. Maybe better than I ever would. Then I found the final voice memo. Recorded 3 days before Eva died. I pressed play immediately. Eva sounded emotional. Tired. If something happens to me, she whispered. Damien, promise me you'll help Lena and Mom. My chest tightened instantly. Then Damien's voice answered quietly. Nothing is going to happen to you. Eva laughed weakly. Sad. You don't know that. A long silence followed. Then Damien whispered something that completely shattered me. I already failed one person I loved. I'm not failing another. The recording ended. Loved. The word echoed painfully inside my head. Did he love Eva? I sat there frozen for a long time, trying to understand, trying to breathe. Then suddenly, something else hit me. The date. That recording happened just 3 days before the accident, which meant Damien was one of the last people to speak to Eva alive. My stomach turned violently. I needed answers. Now. That evening, Damien returned home around 7. And the second he stepped inside, I confronted him. You knew my sister. The room went completely silent. Damien froze. Not dramatically. Just completely still. His eyes slowly moved toward Eva's phone sitting on the table. And immediately, he understood. You found the recordings. Not a question. A realization. I crossed my arms tightly. How long were you planning to hide this? Damien closed his eyes briefly. Like this moment had always been inevitable. Lena. No, my voice cracked sharply. You don't get to say my name calmly right now. Pain flickered across his face instantly. Real pain. How did you know her? I demanded. He stayed quiet too long. Answer me. Finally, Damien spoke. Softly. Carefully. I met Eva 2 years ago through a legal case. I frowned. What legal case? She worked briefly with a non-profit organization my company funded. That doesn't explain any of this. I know. My chest burned with anger. Did you love her? That question hit him hard. I could see it. Damien looked away immediately. And that silence told me enough. Oh my God. It wasn't simple, he said quietly. I laughed bitterly. Of course it wasn't. She was engaged. I blinked. What? Damien nodded slowly. My entire body went cold. Eva had never told me she was engaged. Never even hinted at it. To who? I whispered. Damien hesitated. Then finally answered. To a man named Daniel Reeves. I frowned immediately. I'd never heard the name before. She ended things before the accident, Damien continued quietly. But Daniel refused to accept it. Something dark moved through his expression briefly. He became obsessive. My stomach tightened. What does that have to do with you? Damien looked directly at me now. And, for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Because the night Eva died, he whispered. She called me before the accident. The room felt suddenly airless. She sounded terrified. I stopped breathing. She told me Daniel had been following her. No. She asked me to meet her. My hands started shaking again. But by the time I got there, Damien's voice cracked for the first time since I met him. The crash had already happened. Silence. Complete silence. My heart pounded painfully inside my chest. No, I whispered weakly. Damien looked destroyed now. Not cold. Not composed. Destroyed. The police ruled it an accident, he said quietly. But Eva didn't believe Daniel would leave her alone. A pause. And, honestly, neither did I. I stared at him in horror. You think my sister's death wasn't an accident? Damien answered with terrifying honesty. I don't know what to believe anymore. And in that moment, I realized something horrifying. My marriage wasn't built on romance, or coincidence, or even pity. It was built on guilt, secrets, and a dead woman standing silently between us. I thought my husband was hiding secrets from me. But then I discovered something worse. My sister had been preparing for her death before it happened. After Damien's confession, nothing felt real anymore. The walls of the house felt unfamiliar. The marriage felt unfamiliar. Even my memories of Eva suddenly felt incomplete. Because how much did I actually know about my own sister? Apparently not enough. That night, Damien slept in the guest room without me asking him to. Not because we fought. Not because he was angry. Because he knew I was afraid of him now. And honestly, I didn't know if I should be. I stayed awake until almost sunrise scrolling through Eva's hidden files again. Looking for answers. Looking for lies. Looking for anything that made sense. But the deeper I searched, the stranger everything became. There were photos of Damien I had never seen, voice notes, locations, private thoughts. And through all of it, one thing became painfully clear. Eva trusted him deeply, which made no sense if he was dangerous. Then around 3:17 a.m., I found a video file hidden inside an unnamed folder. No title, no thumbnail, just a black screen. My heartbeat slowed immediately. I pressed play. At first, the screen stayed dark. Then suddenly, Eva appeared. She looked exhausted. Eyes swollen, hair messy, like she had been crying before recording. The date in the corner made my stomach twist. 2 days before her death. Eva stared at the camera silently for several seconds, then finally whispered, "If you're watching this, Lena, something went wrong." My entire body froze. "No. Before you panic," she continued softly, "I need you to listen to everything first." I grabbed the phone tighter. "This isn't easy to explain." She laughed weakly. "Honestly, I don't even know where to start." Tears already burned my eyes. "First, I'm sorry." The moment she said that, I started crying. Because suddenly, this felt like goodbye. A real goodbye. Eva wiped her eyes and continued. "There are things I hid from you because I thought I was protecting you." The room felt silent except for her voice. "You remember Daniel," she said quietly. I frowned immediately. "Daniel?" Then suddenly I remembered. Very faintly. A tall man from years ago. Someone Eva briefly dated but never spoke about seriously afterward. "You probably thought we broke up normally," Eva continued. "We didn't." Fear slowly crawled through my chest. Daniel changed after we got engaged. Engaged. Again, that word hit hard. He became controlling, angry, obsessive. Her voice trembled slightly. At first I ignored it because I loved him. I covered my mouth slowly. But eventually, I got scared. Eva looked down briefly, like remembering hurt physically. "The night I tried ending things," she whispered. "He told me if I ever left him, nobody else would ever have me." My stomach turned. Then she looked directly into the camera. And suddenly she sounded terrified. "Lena, I think he means it." A chill ran down my spine instantly. "He keeps showing up places, calling constantly, watching the house." Her breathing became uneven. "And I know how crazy this sounds, but..." She paused. "I think he's following me." I felt physically sick now. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered at the screen through tears. Then came the part that changed everything again. "There's something else you need to know about Damien." I went completely still. Eva smiled sadly. "He's not who you think he is." My heartbeat pounded harder. "He looks cold when you first meet him," she continued softly. "But he's one of the kindest people I've ever known." I frowned through tears. "He helped me leave Daniel." A pause. "He gave me legal protection when Daniel started threatening me." I stared at the screen in disbelief. "He kept trying to convince me to go to the police," Eva whispered. "But I didn't want Mom or you dragged into the mess." The room suddenly felt too small. "So, if anything happens to me..." Eva's voice cracked completely. "None of this is Damien's fault." I closed my eyes instantly. Pain shot through my chest. Because deep down, part of me had started suspecting him. Eva kept speaking softly. "And Lena..." A tiny sad smile appeared. "If Damien ever seems distant around you, it's because he blames himself for things he couldn't control." I remembered Damien's face when he talked about her death. The guilt in his eyes. The exhaustion. Then Eva said something that completely shattered me. "He doesn't know I'm recording this." She laughed weakly. "He'd probably hate me for it." A pause. "But I know him." Her expression softened deeply. "If I die..." Her eyes filled with tears. "He'll spend the rest of his life trying to protect the people I loved." My breathing stopped. No. No, no, no. Because suddenly, I understood why Damien appeared after our financial collapse. It wasn't random. It wasn't manipulation. It was a promise. A promise he made to Eva. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably now. Then came the final part of the video. The part that destroyed me completely. Eva looked directly into the camera and whispered, "And if he asks you to marry him someday..." Please understand something before you judge him. My heartbeat became painfully loud. He won't do it because he pities you. I stared at the screen, frozen. Eva smiled sadly through tears. He'll do it because somewhere along the way. A pause. He already started caring about you too. The video ended. Black screen. Silence. And I sat there crying so hard I could barely breathe. Because suddenly, everything changed again. Damien didn't marry me because of guilt alone. Somewhere before we even met, my sister had already been telling him stories about me. The way I loved books. The way I stayed up too late. The way I took care of Mom after Dad died. The way I pretended to be stronger than I was. And somehow, without realizing it, he had already become emotionally connected to me long before I ever knew his name. Morning sunlight slowly entered the room while I sat there emotionally shattered. I didn't know what hurt more. Learning Damien wasn't the villain. Or realizing my sister trusted him more than anyone. A soft knock came at the bedroom door around 8 a.m. Lena. Damien's voice. Quiet. Careful. I wiped my face quickly. But it was pointless. I looked destroyed. He opened the door slowly after a few seconds. And the moment he saw me crying, his expression changed immediately. What happened? I held up Eva's phone silently. And for the first time since I met him, Damien looked genuinely afraid. You found something else. I nodded slowly. Then I whispered the words that made his face lose all color. She recorded a goodbye message. Damien went completely still. She talked about Daniel, I continued softly. She talked about you. Pain flickered across his face instantly. Then I asked quietly, did you really promise her you'd protect us? Damien looked away. And that silence answered everything. My chest tightened painfully. You married me because of a promise. No. The answer came immediately. Firmly. I looked at him carefully. Yes, I promised Eva I'd help your family, he admitted softly. But that's not why I married you. Then why did you? Damien stared at me for several long seconds. And when he finally spoke, his voice sounded more vulnerable than I had ever heard it. Because losing Eva taught me something terrifying. I waited silently. That life changes faster than people think. A pause. And by the time you realize what someone means to you, his eyes met mine. Sometimes it's already too late. The room went silent. Then he whispered the one sentence I never expected. I couldn't save your sister. But somewhere along the way, I fell in love with the way she talked about you. My heart stopped. And suddenly, this marriage no longer felt fake. It felt dangerous. Because real feelings were starting to exist inside it. The more I started trusting my husband, the more it felt like someone wanted us afraid. And one night, at exactly 2:14 a.m., I saw a man standing outside our house watching my bedroom window. After Eva's video, everything between Damien and me changed. Not suddenly. Not magically. But quietly. Like two strangers slowly lowering weapons they didn't realize they were holding. For the first time since our wedding, I stopped seeing him as a mystery. And started seeing him as a person. A tired person. A lonely one. A man carrying guilt so heavily it had shaped his entire life. And strangely, that made him easier to understand. A few days after the video, I found Damien asleep on the living room couch with paperwork spread across the table beside him. Legal files. Debt records. Insurance documents. All connected to my family. He had been secretly fixing problems behind the scenes for weeks. Without mentioning it once. I stood there quietly watching him sleep. And suddenly, I noticed how exhausted he looked. The dark circles under his eyes. The tension even in his sleep. The way one hand still held a pen loosely like he had fallen asleep working. This wasn't a man pretending to care. This was someone carrying responsibilities nobody asked him to carry. And for the first time, I felt guilty too. That morning, I made coffee before he woke up. A small thing, but somehow it felt important. Damien looked surprised when he entered the kitchen. You're awake early. You fell asleep working. His eyes briefly moved toward the living room. Then back to me. I didn't mean to. You do that often? A faint, tired smile appeared. More than I should. For a moment, the conversation felt normal, dangerously normal. Then I asked quietly, "Why didn't you tell me the truth earlier?" The softness disappeared from his expression instantly. I wanted to, but he looked down at the coffee in his hands. "You already married a stranger." A pause. "I didn't want you waking up beside one connected to your sister's death." Pain tightened in my chest. Because somehow, that answer felt honest. Not manipulative. Not rehearsed. Just painfully human. Over the next 2 weeks, Damien and I slowly started spending more time together. Not romantically. Not intentionally. Just naturally. Late dinners after work. Quiet conversations. Watching movies neither of us actually paid attention to. And little by little, the house stopped feeling emotionally cold. But beneath that growing closeness, something darker still existed. Eva's death. Daniel Reeves. The unanswered questions. Because despite everything, one fact kept haunting me. Eva was terrified before she died. And people that terrified don't usually crash accidentally after calling for help. One evening, Damien finally spoke the thought both of us had been avoiding. "I hired someone to look into Daniel." I looked up immediately from the couch. "You what?" "A private investigator." My stomach tightened. "Damien." I needed to know if Eva was right. Silence filled the room. Then quietly I asked, "What did you find?" His jaw tightened slightly. "Nothing good." Fear crawled slowly into my chest. Damien sat across from me carefully. "Daniel disappeared for several months after Eva died." "What?" "He quit his job. Changed apartments. Broke contact with most people." That sounded wrong immediately. Why would someone do that? Damien's eyes darkened slightly. Either grief, a pause, or guilt. The room suddenly felt colder. Then Damien added something worse. He recently returned to Seattle. My heartbeat stopped for a second. When? About 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Around the same time Damien and I got married. A terrible feeling settled inside me instantly. "You think he knows about us?" Damien didn't answer immediately, which terrified me more than words would have. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside the house made me anxious. My stomach tightened instantly. Slowly, carefully, I looked toward the glass. And froze. There was someone standing outside the house. Watching. A man. Tall. Motionless. I couldn't see his face clearly in the darkness. But I knew one thing instantly. He was staring directly at my window. Fear exploded through my body. "Damien," I whispered sharply. He woke immediately. Not confused. Alert. "What happened?" "There's someone outside." Damien sat up instantly. His expression changed the second he looked toward the window. The man was still there. Completely still. For one terrifying second. Nobody moved. Then the figure suddenly turned and disappeared into the darkness. Damien was out of bed immediately. "Wait." I grabbed his arm desperately. But his face had already changed. Cold. Focused. Dangerous. "Lock the door," he ordered quietly. Then he ran downstairs. My hands shook violently while I followed. By the time Damien reached outside, the street was empty. No footsteps. No car. Nothing. Just silence. Damien stood in the driveway breathing heavily while scanning the darkness. And for the first time since meeting him, he looked genuinely scared. Not for himself. For me. When he came back inside, I immediately asked, "Was it Daniel?" Damien rubbed a hand over his face slowly. "I don't know." But his eyes told me he feared the answer was yes. The next morning, Damien insisted on increasing security around the house. Cameras. Motion lights. Extra locks. I watched quietly while he worked. And suddenly remembered something Eva once said in her video. He protects people even when it destroys him. That was Damien. Completely. Later that evening, while Damien spoke with the security company outside, I checked the mailbox. Inside was a plain white envelope. No stamp. No address. My stomach tightened instantly. I opened it carefully. And nearly dropped it. Inside was an old photograph of Eva, standing outside her workplace, looking over her shoulder nervously. Written across the back in black ink were 5 words. Some secrets should stay buried. My hands started shaking violently, because underneath the message was another line. Smaller. More terrifying. Ask Damien what really happened that night. The blood drained from my face instantly, because suddenly, everything became uncertain again. Even my husband. And somewhere in the distance, I could feel the past getting closer to us. The night my sister died wasn't an accident. And when I finally learned the truth, I understood why Damien looked at me like someone trying to protect the last thing he had left. I didn't tell Damien about the photograph immediately. Not because I wanted secrets between us. Because I was afraid of what his reaction might reveal. The message kept replaying in my mind. Ask Damien what really happened that night. Not what happened to Eva. What Damien did. That difference terrified me. All evening, I watched him carefully. The way he checked the windows twice before bed. The way he stayed calm for my sake even when I could see tension hidden in his shoulders. The way he kept protecting me automatically. And somehow, that made everything harder. Because the more I cared about him, the more dangerous the truth became. Around midnight, I finally walked into his office holding the photograph. Damien looked up immediately. And the second he saw my face, he knew something was wrong. What happened? Without speaking, I handed him the picture. The color disappeared from his face instantly. Then he turned the photo over, read the message, and went completely still. The silence lasted too long. Finally, I whispered, "Tell me the truth." Damien closed his eyes briefly, like he had been running from this moment for a very long time. Lena, no more protecting me. No more half-truths. My voice cracked. If I'm in danger, I deserve to know why. His jaw tightened painfully. Then slowly, he sat down. And for the first time since I met him, he looked broken. The night Eva died, he began quietly. She didn't just call me once. I felt my stomach twist immediately. She called 7 times. 7. The first 6 calls. He looked down at his hands. I ignored. The room felt suddenly airless. What? Damien's voice became hollow. We had argued earlier that day. Pain flickered across his face instantly. She wanted to go public about Daniel's threats. A pause. I told her it would only make things worse. I stayed frozen, listening. She accused me of being afraid. Were you? Damien looked at me slowly and answered honestly. Yes. Silence. Daniel's family was powerful, Damien continued quietly. Money. Political connections. Lawyers. A bitter smile appeared. They buried problems for a living. Fear slowly crawled through me. Eva thought exposing him publicly would protect her. Damien's eyes darkened painfully. I thought it would provoke him. Then he whispered the sentence that shattered me. So when she called the first 6 times, his voice cracked. I let my pride answer instead of my fear. Tears burned instantly in my eyes. No. The 7th call. Damien swallowed hard. She sounded terrified. The room became silent except for his breathing. She said Daniel had followed her from work. His hands tightened together. She kept saying, I think he's going to do something. I covered my mouth slowly. She asked me to meet her at the highway exit near Riverdale Bridge. My heartbeat became painfully loud. I drove there immediately. Damien stopped speaking for several seconds, like the memory physically hurt. When I arrived, his eyes filled slightly. Her car had already crashed through the barrier. I started crying quietly before he even continued. There were police already there. A pause. And Daniel. I looked up sharply. What? Damien nodded slowly. He claimed he saw the accident happen while driving nearby. My stomach turned violently. That doesn't prove anything, I whispered weakly. No, Damien admitted. But Eva's phone records showed she never called emergency services. His expression darkened. Her final calls were all to me. A horrible silence settled between us. Then Damien reached into his desk drawer slowly and pulled out a folder. I never wanted you involved in this. Inside were investigation documents, photos, witness reports, private notes, and one specific image made my blood run cold. A traffic camera still. Eva's car. And another dark vehicle following closely behind it. Timestamped 10 minutes before the crash. Daniel's car, Damien whispered. I stared at the image numbly. He denied following her, Damien continued. But his location records disappeared that night. Disappeared. Someone erased them. Fear spread through my chest like ice water. Why didn't the police investigate further? Damien laughed bitterly. They tried briefly. A pause. Then the case was quietly closed. I suddenly understood everything. The guilt. The obsession. The protection. Damien blamed himself because if he answered sooner, maybe Eva would still be alive. And somehow, that guilt chained him to my family afterward. Tears slid down my face silently. You loved her, I whispered. Damien looked down immediately. Yes. The honesty hurt. Even though I already knew. But not the way you think, he added softly. I frowned slightly. She saved me first. I stayed quiet. After my younger brother died, his voice became distant. I stopped feeling connected to life. A weak laugh escaped him. I existed. That's all. I remembered the loneliness inside his eyes the day we met. Now it made sense. Eva was the first person who forced me back into the world. His expression softened painfully. She used to say I looked at life like someone apologizing for surviving. That sounded exactly like Eva. She taught me how to care again, Damien whispered. And then I failed to save her. The room filled with silence again. Heavy silence. Then I finally asked the question my heart feared most. Did you marry me because I reminded you of her? Damien looked shocked instantly. No. The answer came firmly. Immediately. Then why? He stared at me for several long seconds. And when he finally spoke, his voice sounded completely honest. Because you didn't. I froze. Eva was loud, he whispered softly. You're quiet. A faint emotional smile appeared. She ran toward people. His eyes stayed on mine. You hide from them. My chest tightened painfully. She believed everyone deserved second chances. A pause. You believe people eventually leave. Tears filled my eyes again. Because he saw me too clearly. I didn't fall in love with you because you were her sister, Damien whispered. I fell in love with you because despite everything life did to you. His voice cracked softly. You still stayed gentle. The room blurred through tears. Because suddenly, this no longer felt like a marriage built on tragedy. It felt like two broken people accidentally finding each other inside grief. Then suddenly, a loud sound shattered downstairs. Glass breaking. Both of us froze instantly. Damien stood immediately. Stay here. Fear exploded through me. Another crash echoed from downstairs. Damien grabbed something from his desk drawer. A handgun. My stomach dropped. Damien. Lock the door behind me. Then he ran downstairs. My hands shook violently as I followed anyway. By the time I reached the living room, the back door stood open. Cold air rushed inside. And Damien stood near the shattered window staring outside into darkness. What happened? His face looked terrifyingly calm. Someone was here. Then he slowly bent down and picked something up from the floor. A small silver object. My heart nearly stopped. It was Eva's engagement ring. The one never recovered after her death. Which meant only one thing. Daniel Reeves was no longer hiding. He wanted us to know he was watching. 3 days later, the police finally reopened Eva's case after new evidence from Damien's investigator surfaced publicly. Daniel disappeared before officers could arrest him. But this time, he couldn't bury the truth anymore. Months passed slowly after that. Painfully. But honestly, Damien and I stopped pretending our marriage was temporary. Stopped pretending feelings weren't growing between us. Because somewhere between grief, fear, and healing, love quietly became real. Not perfect love. Not easy love. The kind built slowly through truth. Through surviving. Through choosing someone again and again after seeing their worst pain. One evening almost a year later, Damien and I visited Eva's grave together. The sky was soft gray. Rain barely touched the flowers. I knelt quietly beside the headstone. And for the first time since losing her, the The pain didn't feel sharp anymore, just deep. Damien stood silently beside me, then finally whispered, "I'm sorry I couldn't save her." I looked up at him slowly, and for the first time, I truly understood something important. Some people enter your life because they save you. Others enter because they survived the same storm you did. Damien was both. I reached for his hand quietly, and this time, he held mine without hesitation. Because sometimes love doesn't begin with romance. Sometimes it begins with loss, with guilt, with impossible choices. And somehow, against all odds, two broken people still choose each other anyway. I married a stranger to save my family. But the stranger wasn't the real mystery. The real mystery was how grief can connect people long before they realize they're falling in love. My sister's death brought Damien into my life. But it was truth, not tragedy, that made him stay. And maybe that's what real love is. Not finding someone perfect, but finding someone willing to stand beside your pain and not run away. If this story touched your heart, comment. Some love stories begin with pain. Share the story with someone who believes real love means staying even after the truth hurts. Follow for more emotional love stories filled with mystery, heartbreak, and unforgettable endings.